Hey guys, this is Eckhart Hello and welcome to another Star Wars Legends lore video, and today we'll be talking about one of the stranger fleets which actually see action in Star Wars Legends. However, before we get to it, we need to cover the backstory of one of the most interesting figures in Star Wars Legends, Natasi Daala. If you want to skip that and get straight to the big spaceships, I'll put a timestamp where you can do so. So, Natasi Daala, who was actually a lover of Grand Moff Tarkin, was first introduced as an Imperial officer who had been stationed at the secluded MAW installation in the Jedi Academy trilogy. Her base was discovered by the New Republic, and the extraordinarily powerful superweapon, the Sun Crusher, was stolen from under her nose. Not only was the Sun Crusher lost, but her fleet of 4 Star Destroyers, which were positioned in the MAW, were either destroyed or, in the case of the Gorgon, battered to the point of non-usability over several battles. Daala would then retreat for some time, but would return before long and attempt to reunify the Empire, who at this point was squabbling across the galaxy. At Toss Beacon, alongside, that point, Captain Pellaeon, she murdered 13 of the remaining Imperial warlords, which represented much of the Empire's power, and through violence reunified the Empire, seizing their assets and forming a coordinated plan of action. However, Daala totally mismanaged this. Despite, as I said, securing numerous assets, including a new Super Star Destroyer and the Deep Core's Crimson Command, she was unable to meaningfully injure the New Republic, failing especially spectacularly with a poorly planned assault on Luke's Jedi Praxium at Yavin 4, where she lost the Super Star Destroyer Nighthammer. Daala, rightfully disgusted with herself, abdicated command to the much more capable, now Admiral Pellaeon, and fled. Although Daala obviously remained active in the subsequent years of the Galactic Civil War and the Yuuzhan Vong War, we'll leave a discussion of those misadventures for another day. Right now, let's skip ahead to the Second Galactic Civil War. So, the Second Galactic Civil War was caused by several factors, but primarily the militarization and imperialization of the Galactic Alliance, alongside a growing independence movement among strongly willed planets like Corellia. At this point, there's been a formal peace between the Galactic Alliance and the Imperial Remnant, but both maintained individual sovereignty. A key plot thread throughout the Second Galactic Civil War was the dark side fall of Jacen Solo, who, by war's end, had assumed the Sith moniker of Caedus. Fairly early on in the war, Caedus had assumed one half of a joint Chief of State position after helping to depose previous Chief of State Cal Omis, who was seen by some as mismanaging the escalating war. Jacen was becoming increasingly Vader-esque and not only cruel among individuals, but also aggressively pursuing the war on multiple fronts. Eventually, Jacen reached out to the Imperial Remnant for military support in attacking the Fondor shipyards. Pellaeon, who was still leading the Remnant at this point, in turn reached out to Daala with a secret coded message. Nonetheless, he agreed to support the effort in a limited way. This leads to the Battle of Fondor, one of, if not the most complicated battles in Star Wars Legends. If you guys want a full battle breakdown, I will do it, but I don't want to unless there's real interest, so let me know down in the comments. But on a basic level, a standoff occurs between Jacen Solo and his co-chief of state, Admiral Niathal, and also Pellaeon, over whether to attack Fondor after their surrender. After full fighting breaks out, Caedus orders Pellaeon to support his side of the GA. However, Pellaeon refuses and is assassinated by Jacen's Sith apprentice Tahiri Vela. With Pellaeon dead, most of the Imperial Remnant faction sides with Jacen, and he now heavily outguns Cha Niathal's forces. However, with the death of Pellaeon, Daala enters the battle, and her appearance is so surprising that Jacen initially thinks it's a Jedi mind trick. Ships began popping out of hyperspace in flares of white light, and as the transponders began kicking in and the sensors pinged others, Caedus knew the Jedi were back with one of their mind games. He was on the receiving end of another elaborate Jedi mind assault, or at least his crew were, and now he hoped everyone understood how very real the Falinasi illusions were in the hands of a master, how they registered on all the senses and even sensors, if the illusionist was powerful enough. But, of course, it wasn't an illusion, and it wasn't only the fleet's presence that was strange, but also the age of the vessels, with one officer saying that it looked like an aerospace museum had been raided. On other occasions, the MAW Irregular Fleet is called a scrapyard or junk fleet. So here's the story. During her time in seclusion, Natasi Dalla had basically been collecting ships that were otherwise discarded or that she could otherwise get access to. She was funding the continual upkeep and repairs through, among other things, mercenary work. "You know what we girls are like," said a slightly rasping patrician voice over the open comm. "We just can't throw anything away in case it comes back into fashion years later. You have me at a disadvantage, madame. My apologies, Colonel Solo. Where are my manners? This is Admiral Dalla, flag officer of the MAW Irregular Fleet, and I ask you to stand down and leave Fondorian space now." According to Legacy of the Force Revelation, the fleet was made up of, at the very least, Crusader cruisers, a Victory Star Destroyer, Republic-class cruisers, assassin corvettes, scimitars, and a Venator Star Destroyer. Fate of the Jedi later adds an Acclamator and says generally that the fleet had dozens of frigate and corvette support ships. However, leading the force was one of the most famous Imperial Star Destroyers of all time, the Chimera, former flagship of the Grand Admiral Thrawn, flaring into existence like the avenging swoop hawk that Chakapiri sages said would herald the end of the universe. An Imperial Star Destroyer was now on a ramming course for the Anakin Solo. It had an identifiable pennant code. "Sir, it's I2... Oh, that can't be right," said Dove Horlo. "Someone's doing a PSYOPs job on us." Kaitis took a slow breath. He recognized it too, but this time he believed. She was never confirmed destroyed. It was a vessel that had been flagship to the legendary admirals of modern history and fought at many pivotal battles. The veteran ship was looking a lot tidier than it had at the Battle of Bastion. She was fully restored. "Chimera," said Kaitis. However, despite their age, the MAW Irregular Fleet was armed with state-of-the-art weapons developed at the MAW, specifically crystal phase shifters, which devastated standard ships, piercing through their shields. Those upgrades were among other secret ones also present on the ships. Dalla was able to push back Jason's forces enough that they were forced to retreat, and the MAW Irregular Fleet was also able to add the Bloodfin, Pelion's flagship, to its numbers. The Bloodfin was the first of the new Turbulent line of Star Destroyers, meaning that, in total, the fleet had at least 4 generations of Star Destroyers within: the Acclamator, the Venator/Victory, the Imperial, and now the Turbulent. Alongside that, the other vessels varied in era from the late New Republic era Republic class, which also may in fact be another name for the Republic Star Destroyer, to the Galactic Civil War era's Assassin. Again, especially in relation to the smaller ships, we don't know exact numbers, but this does seem to be the majority of the larger cruisers. The MAW Irregular Fleet saw action again in the Fate of the Jedi series. By that point, Dalla had been named Chief of State of the Galactic Alliance. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and I don't want to talk about it, but in the latter part of the series, she's forced to form a government in exile after a Jedi coup. We'll cover that in another video. Regardless, she was making a leadership bid for the Imperial Remnant, and once again summoned the fleet. Most likely because Dalla was too busy running the GA to maintain her forces, the MAW Irregular Fleet by this point had actually declined in power, and here's a quote from Fate of the Jedi Ascension. "It was smaller than it had been when she had come, too late, to Galad Pelion's aid, and turned the fleet loose on Jason Solo. Gone or dismantled were the vessels that had some of the more unique upgrades that had in the end proved too costly to maintain. Still, there were several vessels at her disposal, in addition to the Chimera, which was an IST-2. The museum quality but still deadly MAW Irregular remnants included another Star Destroyer, a Venator class, an Acclamator 1 assault ship, a Republic-class cruiser, several frigates, and a handful of corvettes of 2 classes. In this case, however, the MAW Irregular Fleet was only a small portion of Dalla's new force, and she was supported by various Imperial MAWs, who brought their own Star Destroyers to bear. However, she was unsuccessful in her goal of taking the head of state position of the Imperial Remnant, as she was attacked by current head of state Jag Fell, who had his own resources and even those of the Empire of the Hand. Dalla's fleet ended up taking refuge basically within a broken moon, so instead of continuing in direct combat, Dalla and Jagged instead decided to hold a general election for the leadership of the Imperial Remnant. Anyway, that's all I had to talk about the MAW Irregular Fleet. This is one of a few examples we've seen of Venators actually seeing use after the end of the Clone Wars. A lot of that has to do with just when most of the post-Return of the Jedi stuff was written. But all in all, I think it's pretty interesting. That, however, is just my opinion. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Do you like Fate of the Jedi and Legacy of the Force? Have you read them? Also, let me know that down below. And if you have any questions you'd like me to answer in a future video, leave them with the hashtag AskAck. Anyway, guys, that's all I have for you today. Have a great week, and as always, may the Force be with you.